В гостях у центра «Matryoshka» Джерард Крогвел, сенатор, который любезно согласился нам рассказать чуть-чуть побольше о том, что происходит в ирландской политике. Gerald, I just explained that in Center Matryoshka you are here as our guest to explain all Russian-speaking community what is going on with elections. On the 8th of February, the new elections is announced. Not all Russian people from different countries, from Baltic countries here, worry about Irish politics. Maybe many of them can vote, but do not go to vote. So maybe you just explain few things about current elections.
Well, I'd be delighted to do that. Let me first say that this is a general election where we elect the National Parliament. The National Parliament decides the distribution of wealth in the state. Mm-hmm. They decide on education, health, defence, justice, all of the things that concern us. So you said some people don't vote. Remember, people died in history in order that we could cast our vote. So the vote is the most important thing. It is the only chance you have to have your voice heard. And that voice might be lost in the crowd. It very often is, if there's a very large swing towards one government or towards one political party or another. Or it may be the difference. We have had national parliament seats decided by as small as 3 votes. Mm-hmm. In various parts of the country. So the vote is the first thing that's vitally important. The second thing is how we vote. Because in Ireland we don't have a first past the post system. Mm-hmm. Our system is a system of proportional representation, whereby you take all of the people that are running for election in your local area and you decide which one you like best. Mm-hmm. Which one you like second best, third best, fourth best, fifth best, and so on and so forth. So when you get your ballot paper, there's a list of names, mm-hmm. and there's a box beside each mm-hmm. name. And instead of putting an X, which people would do maybe in Russia, I'm not mm-hmm. too sure, they certainly would in England. In Ireland, we put number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, okay. 10. Mm-hmm. And it's my advice that when you're voting, you fill in every box. Unless there's somebody that you absolutely couldn't live with. But you fill them all in. And the reason for this is proportional representation is based on the idea of 50% of the electorate plus 1 mm-hmm. is the quota. So when I get to the quota, I'm elected. You can have a situation where somebody does very well in getting first preference votes but never actually gets elected, because they don't have a significant swing in their favour. So what you got to do is you got to sit down and look at the politicians and decide for yourself which one appeals to you most, which one will fix the road in your local area, which one will deal with housing or homelessness, which one will deal with rent. I know that, for example, in the Russian community and the ethnic Russian community in Ireland, rent and rental property is a huge, huge problem. So now you're down to a situation, do I vote for Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Labour, Social Democrats, Sinn Féin, or do I vote for some independent? If you vote for a person in a party, you vote for the party first and the person second. So I give you an example. Some years ago, I wanted to change the law with respect to gambling. And I brought an amendment to the House of Parliament, and everybody agreed with my amendment. And when I called a vote, I lost the vote. And I asked, why did I lose the vote? And I was told, well, the party didn't agree with you. I agree with you, but the party didn't agree with you. And we have a system called the whip system. The whip system means that the party make a decision on policy. You're a member of that party, you subscribe to that policy. Even if you don't believe it yourself, you're a party member. If you don't accept the policy, you're no longer a party member, and then you don't have the supports that go with being a party member. So when you come to vote on the 8th of February, and you should all be voting, anybody who can, first thing you got to ask yourself is, what is this party offering me? If you're looking at parties. And you've got to look at the promises that they're making versus the current state of our economy. They're all giving away billions. They're going to build hospitals, schools, put more police on the road, have better roads, have better public transport, reduce emissions. They're going to do all these things, but actually ask yourself, what can they actually do? Given the state of the economy, can I believe that they can do these things? So you've got to start taking out all the things you think they can't do. And you're left with a core of what's possible. And you say to yourself, right, actually I like what they're saying, I think they can do that. So then you might give their people 1, 2 and 3 in your vote. And then you look at the next party, or you look at an independent and you say, actually what we need in Parliament is somebody who will disrupt, somebody who will call to question, somebody who will bring ministers in and make them explain. You said you were going to extend Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital in Navan or in Drogheda, and you didn't do it. So what's going on? So sometimes it's good to have an independent-minded person who is not obliged by any whip. I'm an independent in the upper house of Parliament, and I ask some very awkward questions, which they frequently don't like. And by the way, some independents I wouldn't vote for myself, right? It's people who are, I believe the first thing has to be honesty. If somebody says to you, I can't do that, I would have great time for somebody who says that.
Look, so we are voting around now for the people that will go to a parliament where, and what can they actually do, and will they in the position to make any changes, significant changes? You know, some of them might have this desire, but they won't be able to.
Yeah, we're voting in a national parliament, and the truth of the matter is, given the political situation in the country, political parties have published their manifesto, which is, you know, what I will do if elected. But the truth of the matter is, and if we're to be honest about it, the truth of the matter is these political parties' manifestos mean nothing after the election, because no single party is going to take control. So actually what they're going to have to do is sit down and negotiate a whole new programme for government. The last programme for government in 2016, I was involved in the negotiations there. And it's a question of, I'll let you do that if you let me have a little bit of this. So say somebody wants to reduce the amount of fossil fuels being burnt in the country, and somebody else on the other side wants to build more motorways. They'll find an accommodation between the two of them which will give us a motorway extra and maybe one less coal-fired burning. So the important thing here is that the people who get elected, you will finish up with two sides, opposition and government. Government actually really consists of ministers and junior ministers. The rest of the party people are just voting fodder. They're just there to vote whatever way they're told.
Government, how people can affect on who is going to be in the government?
Your number one vote is the most important thing.
So if say Fine Gael would have the majority of the voices, the Fine Gael would have most representatives in the government.
That's right. If Fine Gael have the largest number, they will comprise the government. Maybe
you'll tell us a little bit about the difference between Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil. So there seems to be two main parties in Ireland, and some Labour and Sinn Féin going behind. And so what's the difference?
Well, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, actually, it's extremely difficult to find a difference between them. In the revolution, you had both sides as one unit back in 1916 when they fought for the freedom of Ireland. After that, and this goes back to most revolutions, after that different people wanted to cede power. They wanted the power, they wanted to be in charge. So on the one hand you had De Valera, Fianna Fáil, he wanted to bring the country in a particular direction. And on the other hand you had Michael Collins and his group who wanted to bring the country in a slightly different direction. And it really boiled down to the treaty, where we would remain partially with the UK or we would declare a republic. So Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, there is no great difference ideologically that I can see. The Labour Party was born out of the need for the labour movement, born out of trade unionists. And I think it's a feature of the Western world. We've become very wealthy. and the need for a trade union isn't seen as something important anymore. People are saying we can negotiate our own pay. We don't need a trade union to negotiate for us. So there's been a demise of Labour, and Labour is sort of moving, I suppose, into the background. Hopefully we'll see them rise again. As a former president of a trade union, I would say that. And then the next one we have is Sinn Féin. There's no easy way to say this. Sinn Féin were born out of terrorism on this island, but so was Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. The only difference is there was about 70 years of a difference between the two. Sinn Féin, the political side of Sinn Féin is no different than any other political party, but its origins were born in the provisional IRA, and the IRA murdered people, and that's the truth of it. Sinn Féin are now desperately trying to move themselves into what we call normal politics, and I think you're going to see a significant swing towards them. That may be a good thing, it may be a bad thing, I don't know. They've never been tested in government, so it'll be interesting. In this part of the world, they have in the north of Ireland, but in this part of the world they haven't been tested, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Yeah, under Bertie Ahern, Fianna Fáil claimed to be a socialist party, a party of socialism and of the workers. You're right about Labour. In the last government, not the 2016 one, but the one before 2016, 2011-2016, Labour played a huge part in that government. And we did see social change. We did see, for example, minimum wage coming in. We did see the Workplace Relations Committee and the Labour Court changed. We did see social policy change, and the power they had in government would have gotten those things over the line. So I agree with you that there is a drive for social equality and a drive for social understanding, but I disagree with you that it's not sort of quasi-bourgeois, because the strength of the labour movement really only exists in the public sector, not in the private sector. And unless workers understand their power and their power to affect social change and their power to make the country we live in a better place for the citizens. And Labour are the party who can do that. They can get that message across, but they will not have the numbers in the next Parliament. Labour will probably take 2 or 3 elections to recover. The price of supporting Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael in government is you will be annihilated in the next election, because the junior partner always gets blamed for everything that was bad, and the senior partner always gets blamed or always gets complimented for what's good. Brendan Howlin, the leader of the Labour Party, was Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform. It would be fair to say that people blame him for every cut that took place between 2007 and 2014. Michael Noonan was the Minister for Finance with Howlin, so they're both peers. Michael Noonan would be credited as the man who put the country back on its feet, who got the economy going again. And the sad fact of the matter is, if Labour hadn't done what they did and cut pay and done, at the time I was president of a union, we cut teachers' pay by 30%, right? We did it because we needed to save the country. That's no good to the person who just lost 30% of their pay.
Not at all.
That was at recession time, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
But recession time is also a funny time when their loans were given back to the banks, and just banks benefited those. What support, huh? They could take that money towards salaries of the teachers, huh?
Yeah.
Who made that decision?
This is where, when you elect a government, they'll make the decisions that will impact the rest of us. And that particular government from 2007 to 2011 to 2016 were absolutely brutal in the things they did. And yet, in another way, they were absolutely reckless. Like the banks, you mentioned the banks, Anastasia. The banks will not pay tax for probably another 20 years because they can write off the losses from the economic crash against their tax for the next 20 years, right?
And they can keep the interest they want.
Yes.
Even during the difficult times, the AB Bank didn't reduce the interest as many other banks.
And they can have a higher
and
interest
state
rate.
government and their state-owned
They
bank.
will always be in business. They always find their clients.
Capitalism will always win out at the end of the
So
day.
do you have any other parties except Capitalist Party?
In
Would
Ireland,
anybody be allowed to vote for?
the Social Democrats in Ireland, which is run by Catherine Murphy and Roisin Shortall, was born out of the Labour Party. They would claim that they have a much deeper feeling for social issues. And without being sexist, women tend to look at social issues in a different way than men in politics. So I would think that they have something to offer, but I'm not sure how many of them are likely to get elected. Again, there is not a left movement in Ireland. If you take France, a very strong left movement. Russia would have a strong socialist side to it. Ireland, so long as I can earn my 60,000 a year or 70,000 a year, which covers quite a lot of the population, even
But
though
not even half.
I think it's 37,000 is the average industrial wage in the country. But there is a significant size of the population that earn 60,000 plus. The big problem you have, social housing estates, where people who are dependent upon welfare or supplemented income through welfare, by and large they don't vote. So it's extremely, the more impoverished you are, the less likely you are to vote.
Because you less believe in
They
this.
don't believe.
Yeah,
Exactly, yes.
no, these guys are going to do. Look, I mean, the truth of the matter is, you're right. Give them enough to keep them quiet, but don't give them enough to let them become powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So, to live on welfare, and I have lived on welfare. I have lived on welfare. I have lost my home to a bank a long, long time ago. But business went wrong, house, everything. I walked out of Galway City with nothing. And I had to recover my life. And I had 2 children at the time. It wasn't easy. The difference is you could recover then. It's not that easy to do it now. Married couples living on welfare in this country are struggling. There is no getting away from that. They hand to mouth. They literally, one of my favourite groups to deal with is our military people. Our military people feed their children cornflakes on a Wednesday because they can't afford to buy food. And slowly but surely our military is collapsing around us. We're down to 8,500 now from 12,500, and it's falling all the time.
Several sectors or several issues in Ireland, as you mentioned, access to consultants, access to medical support, access to the hospital bed, and so on, and education and activities for children after school, and they're not.
They're very poor.
They are like some of them are poor, some of them are very expensive. And having families with 2-3 children, it means like not every family will be able to send their children for horse riding, piano lessons, and so on. So only really those bourgeois families can educate their children to higher standards. And so medical system, education, housing issue. What party to vote for so to get those things sorted? For not bourgeois, but for everyone.
Let me say this to you. If you want to have the social services you're talking about, where you have after-school care for children, creche care for very young children while you go to work, access to sports and access to leisure, access to hospital beds, access to education, consultants, all of these things, then I would say to you, go for the party that is not going to cut tax. Because you can't cut tax and still pay for more things as a state. If
That's
you live,
fair enough. Who is not cutting tax in Ireland?
I have seen nobody that's not cutting tax.
So that's really worth to go. That's really worth to go to vote.
So what you got to do and look and see which of them is going to do the best job or at least is promising to do, the best job with what limited funds we have. Remember, the surplus is about 11 billion, and in real terms available to spend is about 3.5 billion. You can't do all the things they're saying for that. It's part of what's wrong with Irish politics. We tell stories, we make promises, and after elections we go back on them all. If any of the promises that were made down through the years ever came to pass, we'd be living in utopia now.
Yes.
Everybody would want to live in Ireland. It would be a great place, right? But the truth of the matter is, we cannot fulfil the promises that are being made. So what you got to do is, when these guys call to your door and these women call to your door and promise you the moon, you got to ask them, how am I going to get there? Who's going to fund it? Where's the money coming from? You're cutting my tax. You're going to give me an extra £5 a week in my pocket. And all those extra fivers that's going to go to everybody in the country is being taken away from childcare, being taken away from hospitals, being taken away from justice in Drogheda, being taken away from
And I think most of the people wouldn't mind to pay high tax if they get free medical support, after-school education, if teachers are not chasing parents for extra pay to make a copy and
voluntary contribution
fee,
yeah.
and so on and so on.
I mean, my advice to all of the Russian community and extended Russian community that have a vote, use it. Use it, even if you don't like any of them. Pick the least worst.
What will happen if you don't have enough voters?
We'll have a government no matter how many people. 10% of the population vote, we'll have a government.